There's our messenger. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for having us be part of your Friday afternoon. Now that summer has started, and welcome to the June 11th GAR, officially the GAR Byram monthly speaker series. And for those of you that remember GAR, this was his baby, and so it's our pleasure to continue it, and even during this pandemic, which hopefully we've been talking at the executive committee that will be dark in August, actually July and August, I believe. And when we come back, we're going to be revisiting the whole idea of trying to see if we could be in person. So this may be, maybe our last virtual meeting. We'll see. Just like everything else go throughout the country, throughout the state, it seems like it's all over the map. But nevertheless, it is great to see everybody here and to have a great, continue the great tradition that GAR started. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Chris, who's going to introduce our speaker today. And Chris is our vice president of bringing some of the best speakers. And this is what we're known for with the Democratic Club, by the way, is having these great presentations. So Chris has been doing a fantastic job in continuing that. So Chris, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And I'm very pleased today to present to you Asiya Junisbai, who comes to us from Claremont High School. Asiya, in fact, is graduating this year and will be attending UCLA next year. So let's give a congratulations to Asiya. And she is president. Asiya is president of the Young Dems Club and is a founding member of the Claremont Student Equity Coalition, as well as an executive board member of Claremont Change. And Asiya has been involved in the campaign to remove the CUSD school resource officer since June of 2020. And of course, we've had a lot of recent developments about that, which I'm sure we'll hear more about. So I present to you Asiya Junisbai, who will be speaking on the Claremont Student Equity Speaks.
Hi, thank you again so much for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the history of the campaign to remove the SRO for a bit of context. And then I also want to talk about the insights that I've developed throughout this year-long campaign, especially in regards to the way that within CUSD and within the city of Claremont, processes of change happen and the obstacles to change and so forth. So as you mentioned earlier, the campaign to remove the SRO has been going on for just about exactly a year now. So that's as exciting as it is, at times potentially disheartening, because it has been a long stretch, and the students did start off very hopeful that change could occur possibly more quickly than it has been, but it's also been a big learning curve. So as the campaign started off, it was much less organized than it is now. We formed the coalition later on, but it began as pretty much a series of students, primarily students of color, sending emails to the principal of CHS, the superintendent, the vice principal, and just expressing their personal discomfort. And as our campaign began, it was a lot of testimonies coming from students of color that were basically saying that they didn't feel comfortable or necessarily safe being on campus with a police officer present. And what we quickly learned is that that wasn't necessarily enough to have institutional change occur. We began hopeful that if we as students were very honest and said, hey, here's a process that's in place, and it makes some of us maybe feel scared or uncomfortable, and we think that there's a better alternative that could be instituted. We were hopeful that that would be heard, listened to, and acted upon. And instead, we were quickly met with a lot of responses along the lines of, give us facts over feelings. We heard that several times. So we the students were very passionate about this, and we didn't want to see our campaign end so soon. So instead we regrouped, we got more organized, we formed a coalition of the various leaders of CHS groups, and we decided to gather some facts. So we compiled a lot of national data as to the efficacy of the SRO. And what we quickly found was that across the nation, school resource officers, which were perhaps intended to decrease crime on campus or make schools safer, what we quickly found was that despite whatever intentions may have gone into the SRO program, in reality, the program wasn't really living up to what it was intended to. So either crime rates weren't really decreasing on campuses with school resource officers, or sometimes they were increasing. And there wasn't a marked improvement in school safety. So it was across the board a really clear showing that SRO programs aren't necessarily effective, proven to be effective. So we had this data, we compiled it, and we started presenting it to school board meetings. We would make public comment to police commission meetings. And then there was the second type of opposition that we were faced with, which was the need for local data. So after we started receiving a lot of requests for the need for local data, we didn't necessarily have it in our power to have access to police data files or anything of the sort. So we needed help. So we reached out to the police commission, and in response to that, the police commission formed an ad hoc committee specifically to look into the SRO, the efficacy of the SRO in Claremont. So that happened, and I'm happy with that development. I'm really proud to say that the students, we organized together and we were able to have an ad hoc committee formed because of our requests. Another thing that happened as a result of that was that the school formed the district advisory committee. So the district advisory committee is basically a committee of community members, parents, some students, and it was made to look into the issue more broadly of racial inequity at CUSD, not just specific to the SRO. So those were two big things that we, considered wins, because it was we went through institutional means, and these committees were formed to look into our requests. And now it's been maybe about 9 months since the ad hoc committee was formed. And actually on Thursday of June 4th, it was a really monumental meeting, because that was the meeting in which the ad hoc committee was presenting their official recommendation after, doing their research for about 9 months as to what should be done in regards to the SRO. So the ad hoc committee made the recommendation, and there was a split vote, despite their data and their findings, which were very parallel to the national data. Just for more context, what the SRO ad hoc committee found was basically that as it is nationally, locally, the SRO doesn't decrease crime. In fact, there might, and at least in any documented way, there's no decrease in crime. There's no efficacy to the program. And there is actually a documented disparity with the rate at which the CUSD school resource officer gives out citations to different students. One of the most important, in my opinion, findings that the SRO ad hoc committee was able to have was that the students, the Black students at CUSD, are given citations at about the rate of 11% of all students, though they make up about 4% of the student body. So just looking side by side at all of the student demographics, it was clear that, Black students, and also, like Latina, brown students at CUSD, they were being over disproportionately policed and criminalized. So that was a really important finding. And to the students, there was a moment of like, oh, we got them, like we were told, give us facts. We gave national facts. We were told, give us local facts. We have local facts, we have data. So it was very inspiring. And there was this moment of like, maybe all of our work was really finally going to come to fruition. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there was a split vote. So despite the findings of the ad hoc committee, the the police commission decided not to vote to move along the recommendation, which was just that there should be a 1-year interim period in which the school resource officer is not yet removed, but after a year, the school resource officer would be removed. And in that interim period, there would be a committee put together to look into alternatives and look into what could replace the school resource officer. And so it was really disheartening. And what made that police commission meeting almost more disheartening was the fact that there was also, on top of the split vote, a lot of misconduct that took place. There were accusations by some of the police commission members that the whole recommendation put forth by the ad hoc committee was an emotional recommendation, that it was not maybe credible because it was an emotional evaluation. And that was really sad to hear, because that's how it started. That's how this campaign began. We were students testifying that things made us uncomfortable, and they told us you're being overly emotional. So then we did all that we could to take a different route, present statistics, local and national, and after a year, we got hit with the same exact statement: you're being overly emotional. And to us, the students, especially because we're a coalition of mainly students of color, it's hard, because it's like, you know, when you hit an obstacle, we would just try to take a different course. And no matter what course we took, it's like somehow poetically we came to the same opposition. So that happened. So in response, at the June 8th City Council meeting, Claremont Change, some members of the Student Equity Coalition and also community members just in solidarity with us, asked the City Council to just agendize the SRO removal with or without the recommendation from the Police Commission, seeing as the Police Commission was looking, at least from my perspective, to be acting in a very biased way. It was like no matter what information was presented to them, their opinions on the matter were kind of dictating the vote. So basically, the reason why I'm saying all of this is because I think that this whole process was very illuminating. If there's one thing that I learned from this year of activism and also opposition, is that there are some really important questions that I think that we as a community have to be asking. And that is, are our processes efficient? Do they protect and uplift minority students? Do they encourage progress? And do they perhaps primarily serve to protect the status quo? And I think that CUSC students need their elected officials and all of the people with power to be asking these questions constantly. Because when I was first asked to speak during this luncheon, I was told to talk about whatever issues I find relevant to the students. And I was thinking about it, like what's relevant to the students? I could have given you a list of perhaps racial inequities, class inequities, mental health struggles, substance abuse issues, because I promise you that there are plenty of all of those. And I could have gone down that route of talking about all of the things that could be better at our school. But instead, I thought, what's at the root of all of this? When inevitably students come forth with issues of inequity, what happens next? What's the process for change, or what's the process for addressing these issues that students are being honest about? And to me, perhaps the most disheartening and troubling part of this whole campaign is that I don't necessarily think that the processes that we have in place for situations such as those are maximally efficient. When inequities happen and students call them out, if they're told that they're being overly emotional, or if they're told that they're just a sliver of the student body and thus their opinions don't matter, that is really dangerous. Because realistically, CUSD and Claremont High School is a predominantly white institution. So in a predominantly white institution, it's dangerous to run with the majority opinion and only accommodate that. When the minority of students are crying out for help, it's so dangerous to brush that under the rug because they're not a big enough number to matter. Because if Black students only make up a tiny fraction of the general student body, how can we in good faith ignore racism that exists because it's not being faced by the majority of students? It's doing harm. It's doing documented harm, as the SRO ad hoc committee has found. So basically, I think that as a community, perhaps one of the most important and urgent issues facing the students is that when inevitably we ask for change, our ask is not met, it's not acted upon. As a part of this campaign, I've heard a lot of times people telling me and the students that I work with, we see you and we hear you. I've heard that so many times. And at first I was like, oh, great, that's nice. I really liked it. When I heard it 5 months later, I was like, okay, cool, you see me, you hear me. When a year later, after compiling all of the data that we did, we were told that our recommendation was emotional, the same way that it was a year ago, there was this like moment of just reflection and like out of body moment where I was like, okay, maybe after all of this work, we're exactly where we started. And to me, there's no better proof of the institutional problem that we have, wherein maybe we don't in Claremont have put in place the best systems for progress. And I think that what we can do as a community is not be satisfied with that lack. There's a lot of potential for improvement. There's a lot of potential. For example, the police commission should have listened to the recommendation of the ad hoc committee. When the ad hoc committee said, the Black students that you have a responsibility to look out for, they're being overly criminalized by this program that's in place. To me, that should have been the determining factor of that vote. As simple as that. How in good faith can elected officials and people in power allow harm to continue to happen? You know, we have a lot of potential for progress and for change, but there has to be a consciousness that the processes that we have in place aren't meeting the needs of the students, because there are a lot of issues facing students, and without going too far down the list, mental health is a really big and urgent aspect of that. Recently, we lost another student, and it's not the first student that we've lost this year. We've had several students pass away, and you know, in the face of all of that, it's like, what change is happening? How are the students' needs being met? How are they being protected? So basically, it's really important that the SRO be removed, but I don't think that yeah, 3 this year, thank you, Chris. So 3 students this year have passed away. Our students of color are being over-policed. A lot of our students have really severe substance abuse issues. When we organize and ask for help, we're condescended or gaslit or told that we've been called babies by the racial equity consultants that were hired by CUSD this year. So it's also, it's just disheartening, I guess is all. But I'm not giving up because I believe that things can get better. It's just important to rally community support for that change as well. The ad hoc committee and the DAC were assembled basically in response to student demands. And the ad hoc committee put together a lot of wonderful work, and it was honestly ignored. The DAC put together a lot of wonderful work, and I was recently informed that the recommendations made by the district advisory committee will not actually be directly presented to the school board. Rather, all of those recommendations will be edited, potentially revised, potentially deleted, and made into a new recommendation by an outsourced private company that the CUSD administration has hired to look into issues of racial equity. And that recommendation, made particularly by the consultants rather than by the people in the district advisory committee, is the recommendation that's going to be presented to the school board. So what I'm saying is that these institutional means through which we, the students, have been trying so hard to navigate, I think they failed us. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And what would really make a big positive difference is if, you know, the members of the Democratic Club of Claremont stood in solidarity with us, the students, and supported us when we ask that people don't just see and hear us, but they act to help us. And that's pretty much all that I have to say. Thank you.
Asiya, thank you very much for that presentation. What we'll do now is we'll let you field questions, and Asiya, you could field the questions yourself. We have a friendly audience here, and we'll just let them take turns. What I'm going to do, though, as you're doing that, is I'm going to share my screen with the audience, and it's going to have the recommendations of the ad hoc committee on the screen so that people who haven't seen those yet can read them. When I place it on screen, you won't be able to see them all, so I'll have to scroll back and forth, but that will keep everybody in the loop as to what they were. So please direct your questions to Asiya.
As Chris mentioned, there's if you could either raise your hand via the Zoom portion or physically. I think we have a small enough group here that we could see people, or I mean, or just unmute yourself and speak up.
Asiya, so I'll begin. What I like best about your presentation is your focus on the institutions. So you were talking about the merits of the issue, and you're talking about being heard, and then you started focusing on how the way that the institutions were set up really diminished and dismissed the impact of what you were saying. It really struck me that, you know, I think the ad hoc's task, their charge, was to focus on the reality behind the perceptions, so that you can come in as you did initially with your perceptions, and then the commission could ask, well, what's the backup for those perceptions? You went and you got the evidence, and then when you presented the evidence to them, they said that, well, you know, these are just your perceptions, which seemed to diminish and dismiss the work that you did. My question is this, and perhaps some of the other people who are present today can respond to this as well. During the police commission meeting, I, being a busy parent, was going back and forth, so I didn't see or hear everything. But at one point, I recall that there was one police commissioner who was challenging the factual findings. And I was wondering if you or anybody else on this call can summarize what his concerns were and what the responses were.
Thank you for your question. So and this is just my recollection, but the commissioner was saying that, first of all, the racial disparities that the ad hoc committee had found weren't statistically significant. And I feel like that was an interesting tactic because pardon the noise, the ad hoc committee had never claimed them to be statistically significant. And it was really funny because that comment was framed as like a mic drop, but the ad hoc committee was simply saying the truth, which is that there's a documented disparity in how students of color are being offered citations. If you just look at all of the student demographics side by side, Black students are being offered citations at the highest rate of all other students. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's as simple as that. The ad hoc committee acknowledges that with their sample size, which was roughly 200, I believe, it wasn't enough to run a test of statistical significance. So that was never really that was never said. And that's why I don't believe it was necessarily essential to dispute that. And I think what the commissioner missed was the fact that there's a disparity in racial citations. That was the most important takeaway to be had. And the way that the commissioner chose to try to invalidate the statistic rather than just acknowledge how much harm that statistic really represents was a good reflection of that commissioner's priorities, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm going to ask other people who have questions just to speak up because I am only able to see 4 of you on the screen at the same time.
Yes, I do have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
And thank you again for the presentation. From the ad hoc committee, was there any discussion of any compromise? Because it seems like what is being faced right now is the black and white discussion of keep the SRO or not have the SRO. Was there any discussion on practices that could be changed with the SRO, including like the ability for citations or any other role that they can or shouldn't play?
The ad hoc committee, their proposal was to remove the SRO after a year. So their proposal was to remove the SRO after a year. It wasn't to keep the SRO in a changed form. There was that proposal of a 1-year period to think of alternatives, and I think that was a really brilliant part of the recommendation because it acknowledges that there's a lot of room for creativity here, and a lot of room for imagination. So throughout this campaign, it's true, I have heard people propose, well, maybe we should keep the SRO, but take away the gun. Keep the SRO. I've even heard someone say we should just put them in a polo shirt, change the uniform so the kids won't feel so scared. And I guess I would say to that personally is that since this is a program that's proven to not work, and since this is a program that's really likely to actually be harming, I think that if we're thinking about what will help the students most, it's not to keep something broken and try to make it less broken, but it's to invest in a resource that's altogether wonderful, that helps the students thrive, that can address the fact that a lot of the behavioral issues that students have could be prevented in the first place, because at the end of the day, an SRO is a force of reaction to behavioral issues. But coming from a student of Claremont, I can testify that a lot of the biggest issues facing students are mental health, substance abuse, and I think that a lot of the students would thrive so much more from the help of, for example, a community intervention worker or peer counselors, or even just more proctors than anything that the SRO might be contorted to be. Like, the SRO could be changed, but at the end of the day, it's still a police officer. And at the end of the day, police officers are still, proven. This is another important statistic from the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee found that the presence of a school resource officer is related to a documented decline in the mental health of students of color. It causes students of color a documented spike in anxiety, and it just harms their mental health. So I guess that was a roundabout way of saying that a compromise isn't the best solution here. I think that we shouldn't settle for something that's slightly less broken, and we should just totally invest in student well-being and replace the SRO with a resource that is not bad in the slightest.
That was going to be one of my questions. This is Karen Rosenthal. And I was quite concerned when you said significant numbers of students have addiction issues. And it seems to me that what you commented on, what good is a SRO when really what we need is to have Tri-City mental health workers on campus during the school day who are checking out the behavioral issues, trying to make contact with the students who seem to be the most disruptive in the class or whatever, not put the burden on the teachers or the administrators, but from their perspective, provide mental health counseling and addiction counseling. Do you think that parents would approve of that? Or do you think that a lot of parents are in denial about their children's behavioral and mental health issues?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would like to hope that parents are in the loop about the extent to which students are struggling, but I also wouldn't say for a fact that that is the case. I think that it's severely underestimated by a lot of teachers, administrators, and parents, just how much a lot of students are like silently, deeply struggling. I think especially this year, I can almost guarantee that when we come back in person, students are going to have a lot more issues with mental health and substance abuse after a year like this one. So it is essential to have trained mental health professionals. And another important aspect is that the SRO currently does a lot of work in like responding to mental health crises. The SRO is currently a primary responder to mental health crises in CUSD. And I am totally in agreement that the person best equipped to deal with mental health issues is a trained mental health professional. So yeah, if we're thinking about what's best for the students, someone who's specialized in that, 100%.
Good, thank you.
Dee Dee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asiya. I loved your presentation, even though it's a little gloomy. And I have a number of reactions and I guess a question, but my first reaction is to compliment you on the great job of organizing you have done. I know it must be terribly difficult to organize young people as young as you, not you specifically, you're a senior, so you're almost a grown woman, but my experiences with trying to organize faculty in the Cal State system, and you'd think organizing some adults who are highly educated professionals would be a piece of cake, but hell no, they're pretty hard to organize. So, and I know that the undergraduates at our institution are trying to get themselves better organized, but that's hard too. Believe it or not, all of those three groups, your group of high school people, undergraduate students, and faculty, face similar adversaries in our efforts to improve our conditions. And that adversary will always say that they want to hear from us and they appreciate our input. Sometimes they jump the gun and announce that they have consulted with us and therefore they've come up with X, Y, or Z that they wanted to do all along when they haven't even consulted yet. So for their vocal messaging about seeing us or hearing us or consulting with us, it's all BS. There's no substance to it whatsoever. And they already know what answers they want to apply without knowing what questions we want to ask, because they think they know the problem and therefore they think they know the solution or the answer. So it is difficult as heck to deal with them. And that's why it's so important for us to get our membership, whatever it is, very, very organized. So my hat's off to you for doing as much as you have done. My children graduated from Claremont High in the neighborhood of 15 years ago or so. And for whatever reason, the majority of their friends were Latinx, Black, Asian, and queer kids. And so I got to hear a lot about what problems those kids were facing as opposed to the problems of kids who looked like my daughters, little white kids. And so your group are not the first ones who have experienced that kind of racism, but 15 years ago, it was much more difficult for them to get themselves organized. Their families might not have been supportive of them then, or didn't want to hear it themselves. But in any event, what I'd like to learn from you is how you worked with your compatriots, and how you managed to confront the terrifying paternalism of the school administration. I had a lot of firsthand encounters with people like vice principals and so on, whose main objectives seemed to be to shut people up and to terrify them into silence anytime they had a complaint. So just discuss your process a little bit more, if you don't mind. I know that's not about the actual issues here, but I think it's related to being able to solve them.
Thank you. I appreciate your question. It's been a big learning process. As I said, we didn't start off organized at all. We were like a couple of kids that were just sending like urgent emails to everybody that we thought was involved in the process. But like, I didn't even realize that me sending as many emails as I wanted to the principal wouldn't do anything, because it came down to the school board. I had no idea about the institutional processes. So it was, in summary, rolling with the punches, like just trying as many tactics as possible and kind of getting shot down, and then trying a different tactic, from like me making email templates, making a petition, protesting in the street, going to every single school board meeting and saying the same basic thing, giving statistics, just having our coalition of like 10 or so students, and just having us reach out to like 3 friends each, try to get somebody to come to the meeting. And it's hard. It really is difficult, because we are also just students living in a pandemic with our own mental illnesses and all of that, and our own issues. And at the same time, we're doing a lot of unpaid labor to try to make the institution we attend a better institution. So the organizing process, the thing that kept us, effective, I think, was just our passion for the cause. Running into obstacles, we would have a debrief. Like, we'd all schedule a Zoom call, talk about what happened, strategize what we'll do better next time, and move forward, because there really wasn't another option. This is something that we are not going to lose ground on, I guess. It's been a year. If it takes another year, that's okay. But we want to see students thrive. So, we're constantly learning. We're able to identify allies, stakeholders. Claremont Change has been a really huge asset. And yeah, we're figuring it out as we go. But because we care so much about this, even though it definitely gets tough at times, we'll just stick it through.
Any other questions? I'm going to scroll down here to this first insight here at the bottom of page 1 here. I see earlier you were mentioning that it was the racial and ethnic disparities, the third of these insights that you were resting the weight of your case on. To me, it seems a lot more like the first here, the school safety one. If there's no evidence of its effectiveness, then, even if there aren't the disparities, of course, which there are, then, why have it when mental health needs are more pressing? So let me return to my question. Dee Dee, I see your hand is still up. Did you have a follow-up? So Dee Dee, you might want
No, I
to
just
just lower your
forgot
hand.
I'll lower it.
Did the police commissioners attack or challenge any of the other factual findings that you had, or was it just the one about the statistical significance of the racial and ethnic disparities, which, as one of your sentences in the middle of that paragraph suggests, you already acknowledged you had too small sample size? What about some of the others?
So you're definitely correct. I don't want to put all of the burden of like the success of our campaign onto the racial disparities. It is definitely, I guess I would frame it, if I could reframe it right now, I would say that there's no proven efficacy whatsoever. Like, this program has no proof of it being an effective program. And there might be proof that it's actually a harmful program. So that's how I would frame that. Also, moving forward, the police commission can't really refute the fact that it's an ineffective program. There's national data, local data, student testimony. It's like almost an irrefutable fact that the program doesn't work. So what we actually heard instead from the commissioners was that a case for there actually being majority support for the program. Therefore, it should be a program that works. So what the commissioners refuted the statistics with was like an idea that teachers don't really mind the SRO and some community members don't really mind the SRO. And they were basing this off of an unofficial survey, I guess you could call it, though it wasn't really made to be an official survey at all. But one of the commissioners cited like basically a poll as proof that the SRO is effective because a lot of people don't oppose it. And again, that's problematic on a lot of levels because, first of all, that survey wasn't broken down demographically because it wasn't intended to be a survey. If it was a proper survey, it would have been broken down by race, class, any series of demographics, as all professional surveys have to be, so that you can account for how that affects different groups of people, but it wasn't. So that's why that survey shouldn't be referenced as proof of anything. Another reason why, even if it was an official survey, it shouldn't be proof of the efficacy of the program, is because a perception that the SRO is fine by a majority of predominantly white people is not on par with statistical data that it isn't effective. I think equating those two things as evidence is really dangerous because it invalidates data. And if we can't trust data, what can we trust? And it also kind of marginalizes people of color. Because yeah, we don't make up more than 50% at the school, but does that mean that like our pain isn't real? No. I think it's really dangerous to even get into the territory of saying that.
Okay, thank you, Asiya. Unless anybody else has questions, I have one last one, which is when do you expect the school board to be issuing some sort of ruling or decision or hearing the evidence, or is this going to happen during the dead of summer, to the best of your knowledge? What's happening?
It's been hard to get a date out of the school board. With this, we see you, we hear you. Another thing I hear a lot of is be patient. We heard that a year ago. We're hearing that now. Be patient. I'm about to go to college. I'll stay patient, but I don't know. The original thing that the school board was saying a lot of was that they were going to wait for the district advisory committee to make their recommendations because they formed it for a purpose. So they don't want to like kind of go over that and I guess discount the committee, which I was more on board with before I realized that none of the district advisory committee's recommendations necessarily are going to stay true to what they originally were. because they are definitely going to be revised and made into a new recommendation by somebody that the school has hired. So given that, there's no real date that I know of. It could happen, it could not happen. All that we really know is that we need to keep applying pressure. But yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we need to close now. So let's thank Asiya for her presentation. And thank you again. And I hope you'll stay in touch with us. We need to keep reaching out to all constituents and all demographics in the city of Claremont. And Asiya, I hope you'll stay in touch with us and enable us to reach more into your network in the future. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
I'll turn it back over to Sam.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the presentation. It was there's a lot to process here, and it's in a way I am happy I'm no longer on the council, because this council is facing some really different decisions that we didn't have to face back in my day. But I guess, you know, everything comes with whatever's happening during that time. But these are the world's changing so much and so rapidly, and so I just don't know if the council, the school board, and all the decision makers are able to catch up. And so I think I feel like I'm really out of it, but at any rate, that's just me. But thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you all for being available today to hear the program. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll see August, July, we're going to be the club doesn't have any meetings, either Monday or our Friday programs. So we're looking and we're going to try to work it out to see if we're in person come after summer. So we'll keep you posted on that. And in the meantime, enjoy your summer, and thank you very much for being here.
Sam,
Yeah.
before people go, we should let them know that June 28th, Jeanette Royston, the head of the NAACP Pomona Valley chapter, is going to be presenting to us on the topic White Rage, the Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. And yours truly will be presenting in late September, September 27th. Beyond Wages and Working Conditions, Google and the New Abolitionism is going to be my topic.
Very good.
Chris, can I add one more quick note? Sorry, Sam. I just want to say that I think that this is a powerful platform, but I want to say that I think more than having, you know, presenters on it or speaking and giving about the issues, the biggest impact that a club like Claremont, the Claremont Democratic Club, is those who agree. If you don't agree, you don't agree with the issues, and that's okay. But for those who agree and support the students, I think doing that in an active way is really important too. So I think we both, the Claremont Coalition and Claremont Change, we're not just here to talk to you and present. I think we're also waiting for your activism. And I don't expect everybody to come along, but for those of you that are ready to come along, we're here and we have open arms, and we would welcome you to join us, because we need all levels of Claremont to get engaged and do this. It can't just be the students. It can't just be the millennials, as we're called. It's got to be everyone pushing for this progress. So that's my call to action. I appreciate the platform for this, but you know, we need the action too. So if you agree with us, great. If you don't, keep listening, because we'll teach you.
That's a great point, Noah, and it is a two-way street, because it is the long debate and discussion that we're having at the club is what role does the club play. We're hoping probably by the end of summer have have some direction. In fact, the executive committee has been meeting several Saturday mornings discussing this, you know, with your father, as you know. So we're spending we're putting a lot of thought and discussion in this, and it really is a mixed bag. So involvement from you, involvement from other voices, because like I said earlier, and I'll be very honest, I'm not woke. I'm far from being woke. There's some things that I think I'm progressive on, but there's other things that this was, the SRO thing is a new thing for me. Granted, I've been kind of off the council for a couple of years now, but I grew up, I was involved during a whole different time. And so having this understanding and discussion is important. And I appreciate kind of hearing these different thoughts. And so having your voices involved like today and also with the club are so important to people like myself and other members. So these discussions are very worthy, and I think we're going to develop a better plan of action on how we can be more involved and active as well to really cross the entire population of the city. So thank you for your comments. And again, great. We have a great microcosm here in the city of Claremont of so many things that are happening that I think are being discussed throughout the country. And I think if we could figure it out, it is a great template for other places. But appreciate your input and appreciate everyone's input and time in being here today. So if no other comments, everyone enjoy your summer, and we look forward to hopefully seeing everyone in person when we do get back together. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks again, all.